My name is Jude Bowman. This is my homework for week 2. It's probably the strangest thing I've ever done. I'm here to talk about Zachman's framework. Zachman's framework is a classification structure, one of the earliest enterprise architectures. He invented it through IBM in the 80s. It was invented by John Zachman. Okay. Now, to liken Zachman's framework, it's much like the OSI model, where it's more so a standardization type deal, whereas basically standardization of enterprise architecture, you can think of it as that, and breaking down enterprise architecture into primitive models. Okay. Also, it's broken down to several different factors. The first factor that's probably the simplest is scope, which limits the project. Now, when I say scope, I mean that when a project starts and a project is completed, the project has to have limitations. Scope limits project. Okay, like say if we wanted to build an enterprise architecture that translates foreign money from Chinese yen to American dollars, of course our scope's limited to Chinese yen to American dollars. So we have to look at our scope in that functionality, okay? And that limits your project, okay? So scope is probably the most important part of it. And actually working in projects, I actually have used the scope of a project and limitations in the workplace. Scope is probably the biggest thing that can bite you in your butt if it's not applied correctly. Because once the scope is broadened and broadened, it makes the project impossible to finish. I've actually seen that firsthand. Okay. Next, we could say one of the other basic elements of it is what's called a business model. A business model is what the owner expects. Okay, which also relates to scope, as one can plainly see. Okay. A business model, when somebody wants to buy software architecture, that person, of course, wants to limit that architecture into just what they need and only what they need. They don't want if it's a produce distributor, they don't want part of their software being pretzels, simply. Okay? So the business model will be what the owner expects, how the owner expects that particular system to function, and limitations of the system. He only wants to pay for what he needs, nothing more. Okay? Unless a salesman would talk him into extra things. And that's also part of the business model, being able to grow. Of Zachman's framework, having that basic model being able to grow. Okay? So, we went through scope, we went through business model. Now, we'll look into system model. It's how designers plan to enable the business model that's technologically neutral. Okay. Now, technologically neutral means that how can we do this in today's workplace? Okay. Without necessarily taking technology into account. Okay. It's very basic nuts and bolts. I guess that's the best way to explain it. When designers plan to enable the business model, they have to go through 5 questions. What, where, when, why, how, and who. No, that's 6. Okay, it's really what, where, when, why, how. Okay, those are the questions that they have to answer. Okay, they already know who, because that's who they're building the stupid product for in the first place. All right, they have to go through how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it. And that's also when you got your basic timelines of the enterprise architecture, when things are going to be completed, milestones, which is much too expansive right now to get into in a 7-minute monologue here. Okay. Now we get into the technology model, which is the more, to me, it's the more interesting part. Okay. The technology model is the builder's plan to apply technology to the system model. Okay. Now, the system model, of course, as we said earlier, was technology neutral. At that point, the system model doesn't require technology. It just says we're going to transfer this, say, a website, putting information in the website from point A to a data warehouse, point B. Okay? So we didn't say how it would be done. We didn't mention T1 lines, websites, servers. We didn't mention any of that crap. Okay? But now we are going to address that. The technology model is the builder's plan to apply technology to the system model. How do they plan to do this? Say if we are looking at a place that sells skis. Alright, that ski company might have a IIS server that actually hosts a website. Alright, people would log on to that website, make their transaction with their credit card, and that data would then travel by the internet to a web server housed on site. I mean, it could be on site, or it could also be a third party. We don't know yet. Okay. So then that data from the third party or from the in-house web server would then go to a SQL server that would actually store that particular process, that would store that particular order number. Okay, and then that order number would then go pass from the SQL server to the production house or warehouse, and they would say, this is what we need to make. This person ordered 20 skis. You're going to make 20 skis, okay? Then from that production would go to a warehouse, and then that 20 skis would of course would be shipped from the warehouse, okay? And that's also one of the most interesting things of this, is how different companies can work together. Those 20 skis might automatically be transferred to UPS for shipment, depending on what the scope, once again, of what our particular Zachman's framework is. All right, okay. What time you got on this? Okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit more because I took about 20 seconds to actually ask my helper, who ran out of the room, to help me because she's watching Desperate Housewives. Okay. Zachman's framework, as I said earlier, is a lot like the Assad model. It's concept. It's not like it's etched in stone per se. It breaks everything down to very simple, primitive models of how things are going to be accomplished. It's less this, and this, and more so just generalizing things into different tabs. I've actually seen it as tabs. I've seen it on a spreadsheet. I've seen it on. I actually integrated in some Microsoft products. Okay. So Zachman's framework is basically a standardization of enterprise architecture and how to get things accomplished through business model. I actually thought it was very interesting because some of the stuff that I was actually doing in my undergrad, they never actually called it Zachman's framework. That's the first time I've heard of it. And I thought it was very interesting, the fact that I can relate what I learned to those definite concepts of Zachman's framework. So that's the end of my little monologue. Peace out. How do I stop it?